Good afternoon. Welcome to Nar Shalom in Jerusalem. We're here in the hallway next to the old offices because downstairs there's a huge Shiva call for the passing of our first and former Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Shalom Aron Shmueli, and his son is now the current Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Shalom was 106 years old, and I've had the merit to know him about 35 years. And as another rabbi said about Rabbi Shalom, I've known the man 40 years and I don't know anything about him, because he was a man of silence, a man who learned Torah and prayed. But he wasn't into talking, you know. He would tell you things when it was time for you to hear them. And he said some beautiful things, but it's always personal and pointed to the person and the time and the place, because that's where the soul is happening. That's where the emergence of the divine comes into the here and now, through place, time, and intention. So if a person is connected to now, you can pick up the true now for any person, any place, anything. And you don't have to be a 106-year-old Kabbalist. You just have to learn a powerful tool called Bitul Gashmiut, which is really the nullification of the physical. Because every human being has a soul, a neshama. And there's different levels of neshama. There's high souls that can understand things in 1 second that take us years to learn. However, the principle still holds is that when you're attached to your soul, because you canceled out your attachment to the physical, then the strength of your attachment to the spiritual gets stronger and stronger. And you become like a larger broadcasting station for for the big home office broadcast, the mainframe of this universe. So Rabbi Shalom was that, and our talks should be for him and all the great tzaddikim. They each have their time on this earth, and then they leave. And they leave us with something, and he left us with much, very much. We've been holding in Torah 101 of Likutei Moharan, and there's a lot of concepts we've already covered that you can get on the YouTube channel. And we stopped yesterday with this idea that a person is a porek o Torah, someone who breaks off the yoke of learning Torah, of living Torah. In other words, he doesn't want to take orders from the Torah or from a rabbi or from the ancient sages either. They give us advice all the time. So if a person doesn't want that authority over him, okay, try it on your own. See how life goes. But the rabbis tell us here, Kol haporek mimenu ol Torah notim lalav ol malchut. Well, what happens is if you kick off Hashem's kingship, they bring the malchut of other kings, other nations, other bosses. And so freedom is illusory, because when I have a master, then I start to begin to feel boundaries, to feel my place, to feel what's not my place, when it's time to talk, when it's time not to talk, when it's time to lead, when it's time to follow. And so the Ol Malchut means I no longer am free to listen to the Torah, because all of a sudden I've got the government telling me what to do, and the tax office is telling me what to do, and the insurance office is telling me what to do, and of course my wife and other people I'm close to, and of course, you know, your children's educators. You have to listen to them, and you have to listen to everything that has to do with this world. And so what happens is your time for Torah and prayer gets limited, because the old Derech Eretz is part of the Ol of the Malchut. The yoke of Derech Eretz means having a full-time, 60-hour-a-week job that wants to know what you're doing every minute of your day. And they tell you can't go do certain things, personal things, when on the clock, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's also part of Ol Malchut, that if I drop the authority of the Torah and want to have freedom, I better really make sure that I understand what freedom is, because the shibud, it's called in Hebrew, the enslavement of the gashmiut, the enslavement of materialism is greater, more profound than being a servant to the creator of the universe and his Torah. So that's what the Rebbe goes on to tell us. The enslavement to metaphysical ideas, which is the yoke of kingship. And this is he calls it derech artziut, which is an interesting phrase, the way of the land. In other words, the way things normally work. That a person gets a job and he works 9 to 5 and he makes a certain check, and that's how he lives. And there's other people that say, no, that's too limited for me. And so he's trying to rise up from the derech, the way of the land, the way of most of the people on this planet, into a higher, more spiritual path. And then you can see that you'll get help with your physical needs because you're paying attention to the spiritual needs. It's a very clear trade-off. But now he introduces the concept we had yesterday, the evil traits of all the nations. That every nation has a certain trait that's connected to it, that it has fallen into, let's say, and a person will fall under the influence of those other nations and their traits, because I have left the nation and the traits that the Torah is trying to teach me. This is the idea of the yoke of the way of the land. Because the person that drops the yoke of Torah, which is the aspect of the 70 faces we learned about yesterday, the 70 shining faces in heaven, he automatically, what happens? He automatically attaches to the 70 dark faces. So you see, it's really quite simple if you think of it this way, that you have day and night, you have light and dark, you have good and evil. Those dichotomies exist. But what we don't understand is that they're really pushing against each other all the time. And they don't mix. It's like that place, the south of Africa, where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean meet, and there's like a clear line in the ocean, you can see it, and they're not mixing. I'm not sure about the physical phenomenon there, but it's just a metaphor for what we're talking about here, about good and evil don't mix. And so it's either you attach to the 70 faces of light, or you attach to the 70 faces. Influences is better than faces. The 70 influences of the darkness versus the light. And these are mentioned elsewhere, obviously in the Kabbalah of the Arizal. But what happens is when I leave the authority of the Torah, and then I affect the balance of this good and evil, and I make a space for the evil influences to come into my life. So either I'm putting out the light of goodness, or I'm getting influenced by its opposite. And it's back and forth every day. You have a good thought, then you have a bad thought. You have a good deed, then maybe not such a good deed. And you're back and forth. We're pushing each other our entire lives. Now most people are like, I don't want this. I don't want to be pushing my whole life good against evil, but that's actually why we're here. Because by doing that, we're proving the presence of our helper, our master, our king. Now, and when we do that, we justify our creation, because we become an image of him in this world. And we can push the evil with the good. We can influence with good. And we no longer become vulnerable to the evil. We become susceptible to the good. We become chosen. And this idea of the dark faces versus the light faces, shining faces, well, where do you think that the bad traits of the servers of idols, the servers of fallen forces, where do you think they're coming from? They're not coming from the light. They're coming from the darkness. The absence, the lack. More. More means there's always a lack. And that's what the darkness gives us. More and more of things that we think we want, and 5 minutes later the pleasure's gone, and you're really in the lack. And this is the idea of the enslavement of the way of the land, the way of the physical realm, is just as we know it to be, a constant struggle, a constant battle to make a living, to find comfort, to find pleasure, to find love, to give love, to do good deeds. It's all a struggle. So the Torah says, come along, attached to Hashem, then you have tools to win the struggle. Where it's very hard, almost impossible to win the struggle of good and evil on a personal, internal level, unless I have help, unless I have the help of these divine teachings and their teachers and the tradition of the life force of the universe that is flowing through everything. He tells us that all those people who accept upon themselves the yoke of Torah, they move away. They push off the yoke of the nations and of their traits and of the way of the land. In other words, I have a job, I make a paycheck, but I'm not dependent on it. And I'm not afraid of getting fired. I'm not afraid of change. I'm not afraid of, if I don't get my money here, where's it going to come from? No, I know it'll come from somewhere else because that's God's business. Because He's the one who has all the power and all the money and all of the influence that we need. And so when we make ourselves available to Him and a vessel for Him, then you don't have the fear that the world is trying to sell you in every day and every way. And when we move off that fear, wow, then you start to taste the real freedom. And the real freedom is to have the awe, the awesomeness in your heart and mind of creation itself. And the awesomeness of being part of it and part of and protected by the one who made it all happen. Then you elevate your fear from all these external things. And you don't need idols, and you don't need stars and constellations, and you don't need to visit the people that may or may not have the truth, because you know there is a truth and it's coming from a much higher realm. So God bless you all, and seek that true, real freedom, and you're going to be a happy person. God bless.